Hey, good day, runners. This is Coach Peter Pym for the week of July 1, 2013. And thanks to sponsor Dead Sound Revival for this week's opening tune choice. If you enjoy alternative, then go to deadsoundrevival.com, where words fail and music speaks. So what's been happening? Well, many Torontonians celebrated Pride Week last week, and there was a lot of excitement on the streets, many quite visual from what I heard from a few that attended the parade. The folks had fun. One of the week's events was a 5-kilometer run, which had over 1,000 participants, including Ontario's Premier Kathleen Wynne, who finished in 433rd place overall, 9th in her category of 55 to 64, and her time was a very respectable 26:21. When I saw that result, I wondered if there were other heads of provinces or states who were so accomplished. So I did a Google, and lo and behold, I discovered that former U.S. President George W. Bush ran in his own President's Fitness 5K challenge back in 2002 at Fort McNair in Washington, and he reportedly finished in 20 minutes and 27 seconds, which that's damn fast. Respectable for any 55-year-old almost leading a country. Anyway, let's get to today's topic. During last week's audio, I mentioned that Frank Shorter was one of my heroes. Well, after I did that audio, I thought this week I would chat about one of my other heroes, a Canadian hero, Jerome Drayton. In 1968, he set the Canadian marathon record, and incredibly, he's held the Canadian marathon record ever since. That's 45 years, people. 45 years. Now, as a young guy, I was privileged to belong to the same track club as Drayton at a time when he was setting the world on fire, and he ranked #1 marathoner in the world in 1969. The ranking was done by the prestigious Track and Field News magazine, which does their rankings at it every year. And I can tell you, it was incredibly cool to have the world's #1 runner in your club. He gave us hope that we could all climb to the top at the time. A little bit different nowadays. I was in such awe of the guy. I remember buying an old dark navy sweatsuit. Why? Because that's what Drayton was wearing. Although he had dark sunglasses, and he just looked the ultimate cool dude. I also recall, one Sunday morning sitting beside him in the High Park change room before we went out for our club run. Naturally, I looked at his legs in a manly kind of way, okay? And I couldn't help but be in awe, especially when I compared his legs to mine. I mean, talk about shredded. It was like looking at a vein road map. Anyway, I got to have many runs with Drayton, joining him on the lakeshore, going back and forth along what's now the Martin Goodman Trail, between tip-top tailors on the edge of Coronation Park and the Humber River. For Drayton, such 10 to 12 mile runs would be his second run of the day, as he was putting in like 150 miles a week, and he was doing that while holding down a full-time job. And Drayton wasn't particularly outgoing, and for some perhaps he seemed a little intimidating, but I found him to be a super guy to run with. He has a great sense of humor, spicy but great, so the miles would just fly by running with him. But much of this information I just talked about, has been written about, especially a couple years ago when Reed Coolsat was running in the Scotiabank Marathon and got a lot of publicity because he was trying to break Drayton's record. And by the way, I hope Reed is recovering well. He had a recent mountain biking injury and really shattered his collarbone. If you're not squeamish, you can go to Reed Coolsat's blog, and he has posted x-rays of what happened. Fairly brutal. Anyway, so I wanted to share two of my favorite experiences involving Drayton to give you an even better appreciation of this dude. So the first one takes place at the old Canadian National Exhibition grandstand back in the 70s, when it used to have a 400-meter rubberized asphalt track. Back in those days, there was a lot of interest in world records on the track that you don't hear much about nowadays. I'm talking about the 1 hour run where runners ran as far as they could in 1 hour, and the 10-mile run. And on Sunday, September 6, 1970, they had a 10-mile race on the track, and I entered it. But so did Drayton and famed distance runner Bruce Kidd. It was an evening race, and I before doing this audio, I looked up the weather, the historical weather on Environment Canada to see what the weather was that night, because the race was in the evening. And the temperatures were in the high teens, 16 to 19, and the winds were very light. So the conditions were great. So off we went for the 40 laps of the track, and as usual, Drayton took the lead. The man never needed rabbits for assistance. Now earlier in the year, Drayton had set the Canadian 10K record on the track of 28:38. So everyone knew he was very fit. And it quickly became obvious that he was even fitter for this race. He just kept knocking off like 69, 70-second laps. And I think by about 4 miles into the race, I had been lapped at least once, and it was soon going to be twice. And it was obvious Drayton was doing something very, very special, so I just stopped running, and I walked into the stands to watch it unfold. And it was just phenomenal. The man was a metronome. I remember him lapping Bruce Kidd, and the contrast in running styles was incredibly dramatic as Drayton looked so much more economical and so much smoother. And on he went, and eventually he set a world record time of 46 minutes 37.6 seconds, which equals 4:39 per mile or 2:53.8 per kilometer. Imagine doing 40 repeat 400 meters in just under 70 seconds each with no rest. So that was a cool night. And by the way, Drayton's time is still pretty respectable when you consider 35 years later in 2005, Haile Gebrselassie ran a 10-mile road race in 44:24. So my next favorite Drayton story was a day when I got a huge amount of egg on my face. In the 1970s, one of the world's most prestigious road races happened each year in London, Ontario, in Springbank Park. And it attracted the best runners in the world, and I mean the really best. Runners like Olympic gold medalist Frank Shorter, Boston Marathon winner Bill Rogers, Ron Hill, who had won the Boston Marathon, Miras Yifter from Ethiopia, who was the 5 and 10K double gold medalist from the 1980 Olympics, and even Alberto Salazar, now the famed coach of Mo Farah and Galen Rupp, participated one year in the high school 3-mile race, which he won. The long race was an uncertified race that they called 12 miles. It was actually a little shorter than 12 miles, but that doesn't matter for the story. Well, in 1975, 3 legends toed the line: Bill Rogers, Frank Shorter, and Drayton. And naturally, there was a huge number of spectators that had driven up to watch the event. And because the course consisted of 4 oblong laps, you could see the runners 2 times per lap. So everyone would be crossing the middle of the oblong to see the runners on each side. Well, after the first lap, Shorter and Drayton were scorching, and they broke away from Bill Rogers and the rest of the field. And the 2 of them just ran together, shoulder to shoulder, each trying to break the other. And this went on until about 300 meters to go. So I'm right about at that point watching the race with a buddy, and as they are approaching, I vividly remember saying to my friend, "Watch this. Shorter is going to dust Drayton with his kick." Even though all of us were cheering our asses off for Drayton. I mean, Shorter was the 72 Olympic champion, and that summer he had won the U.S. 10,000 meter track championships. Well, just as the awesome twosome passed us, Drayton put it in overdrive and blew the shorts off Shorter. And the crowd went crazy, of course. And I walked around with a huge omelet on my face. It was such a great race, and one of my heroes beat one of my heroes. you can really get a feel for how this race unfolded by checking out the several photos that were taken during the race, and they've been posted in one of the two links I'm adding to the audio page. 1975 was a great year for Drayton because 3 months later he won the Fukuoka Marathon, which at the time was the world's unofficial world championships. You win that one and you were the dude, man. And he won that, and he won it in a time that is still the Canadian record of 2 hours, 10 minutes, and 8.4 seconds. So, cheers for the great Jerome Drayton. And that's it for now, runners. See you on the roads.